All right. Good morning, everyone. Good to see all of you. I'm glad my mom's here. I think my other mom's here as well. All my moms are here. Anyway, that's good. It's good to be here this morning. And today I'm going to talk to you about this lesson, how to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. You may think I made a mistake, but actually I intended to say that. And I want to look at how to lose when you are winning. Okay, so we always know that there is, there was that famous Australian skater, Stephen Bradbury, and everyone was happy because he snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. But think of the guy who was leading, who fell over, right? He snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. And that is actually a far more common situation for all of us to face in our lives. And in fact, it is one of the most disheartening things, really, because we all know how hard it is to win. Okay, we know how hard it is to succeed and how hard it is to have victory. And if you look at the Bible, I believe the Bible is the greatest book to give us wisdom and to guide our lives, because it shows us, even amongst all the great people written in the Bible, it shows all their ups and downs and their struggles. And it shows both stories of success to failure and failure to success. Hang on, yeah. So it goes both ways. All right, I'm just saying it goes both ways, and all of us will both experience success and failure. The reason why I say that it is more common to fail than to succeed is just because if you look at it, sin is an analogy for failure. All right, like when you sin, you fail to live up to your commitment to God. And it's always easier to fail than to succeed. If anyone's played golf, the hole is this big and the field is that big, right? So it's like to try and get the ball into that small hole is way hard. And that is what success and victory is about, to live a godly life. And so, like, when you watch them play golf, like when they're so close to the hole and then they miss the putt, everyone says, oh, the whole gallery will say, oh, because it's like the ball just missed. And failure at the brink of success is more painful because we know how hard it is to get to that point and then to fail. And the reason I thought of this lesson was because last week, a few things has happened in the last few weeks. One was in the teenage class, there was a question asked, like Elon Musk, he's done so many things, but now he's very hated by the world. Does it mean that you don't buy Teslas anymore? So they asked, like, is your Tesla all right? And my mom asked me that as well. And I said, yeah, it's fine. Nothing to worry about. And do you discard someone's life and everything they've done just because you disagree with some things that they've done in their life? And I think the world now is very censorious and unforgiving. Like, if you look at the Bible, it's full of life of people, and they're all like normal people. I think if we fall into the trap that anyone you follow or listen to has to be perfect, you will live a very unhappy and unsuccessful life, because no one, myself included, none of us are perfect, and none of us can not fail at some points. Okay, and I think this is the important lesson overall. And I'll share a couple of stories from the Bible today to encourage us, to give us hope, to show us both how they reacted to it and what happened to them in the end. Okay, so the first story is from Moses. Okay, now Moses, I hope some of you know the story. It's a very hard to take story in some ways, because Moses was a great leader. Okay, but we'll read a few passages from the incident that led to his failure in some ways. First one is from Exodus chapter 17, 3-6. For those of you who don't know, I'll just quickly say the background. So Moses was a leader called up by God to free his people from Egypt. Okay, so at that time there were slaves in Egypt, and Moses was tasked with bringing them out into the promised land. Okay, that was the goal. And so this Exodus 17, he had taken them out, and they were going to Mount Sinai, but the desert is quite a hot place, and they were thirsty. Okay, but the people thirsted for water, and the people grumbled against Moses and said, "Why do you bring us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried to the Lord, "What shall I do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." And the Lord said to Moses, "Pass on before the people, taking with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile." And that's when he turned the water to blood in the Nile, and go. "Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water shall come out of it, and the people shall drink." So Moses struck the rock and did it in the sight of the people of Israel, elders of Israel, and all the people drank. Now, after this, they went to the Mount Sinai. They had the golden calf, and all that happened. And so God punished them by making them wander in the desert for 40 years. So this Numbers 23 is near the end of the 40 years of wandering. Okay, so this is just before they actually went towards the end. Okay, and at this point, Moses is already pretty old. Okay, he's like 100 plus. I'll go through that in a minute. And the people quarreled with Moses in Numbers 23-8 and said, "Would that we had perished when our brothers perished before the Lord. Why have you brought the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness, that we should die here, both we and our cattle? And why have you made us come up out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It is no place for grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink." Then Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the Lord, presence of the assembly, to the entrance of the tent of meeting, and fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take the staff, assemble the congregation, you and Aaron your brother, and tell the rock before their eyes to yield its water. So you shall bring water out of the rock for them, and give drink to the congregation and their cattle." Then Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, "Hear now, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock?" And Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock with his staff twice. And water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and their livestock. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not believe in me, to uphold me as holy in the eyes of the people of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them." Just to remind people of who Moses was. I mean, Moses was the classic story of, a child by miraculous, like in God's providence, really. He went to the basket, into the river. The princess found him, brought him up in the royal family. He killed the Egyptian overseer, fled into the desert. God wanted him to come back to lead the people. He said, "I'm not suitable." God convinced him to do that. "I'll give you a brother as a mouthpiece to help you." And he did it. All right. He actually did it. He did those plagues of Egypt. He parted the Red Sea. He took them like 30 odd years around the desert. So when Moses went back, he was apparently already about 80 odd. Okay, when he went back to Egypt. And after wandering 30 odd years, I'm not sure exactly how many years, he's almost 100 years old. In the verses above Numbers, his Miriam had passed away. And in the verses after, Aaron, his brother, was also passing away. So he's not a young guy, all right? He's old. He's gone through everything. All their complaints, all of that stuff, and it still ended up like this. He written the first 5 books of the Bible, and if you look at the history of the Bible, Moses is used as a proxy for the beginning of the law. Okay, Moses is the proxy for the law, and that shows you how influential he was. And yet, in this passage, he disobeyed God. So why did he do that? Like, you would think, he's a perfect guy, right? I just want to say that, bad choices can happen at any time to anyone. And it is not, age and experience don't make you immune to sin or failure, okay? I think, I mean, in Moses' case, you could argue, was it pride? I think God considered it pride because he said, you did not believe in me. If you look at that situation, he was actually at the same rock that he had struck many years earlier. But this time, God asked him to talk to the rock instead of striking the rock, and he chose to strike the rock. Moses thought he knew what he was doing. I mean, he thought he'd done this before, right? I've done this for 30 years. It's all fine. God will be fine. And that was one thing. Was it impulsiveness or frustration? He didn't think it through, or he acted on the spur of the moment. This is probably pretty common. All of us have certain tolerance levels, right? You push us too far and you just explode. Like, that's normal. Like, that's part of human experience. And if you think about it, even God is like that. You push him too far, he got angry, he wanted to kill everyone. And Moses had to say, don't do that, that's a bad idea. He wanted to do that many times, actually. And since we're made in the image of God, there's no reason why we would react any different way. And then finally, he was complacent. He didn't think it was a big deal. You know, God had taken him all this way. Why not? We'll look at the first couple, then we'll look at the third one at the end. Pride. I mean, Wayne did a good lesson quite a while back now on the 7 deadly sins. I think pride is one of them. We always recognize that. Proverbs 16:18, pride goes before destruction and the haughty spirit before fall. It is important to never be too proud to obey God or to keep learning, all right, regardless of how old you are, how experienced you are, because there's always something we don't know, okay? We will never know everything. In 1 Peter 5, you know, if you're younger, be subject to the elders, clothe yourself, all of you, with humility toward one another. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And I think in our lives, you need to always have a spirit of inquiry, of learning, of humility. Okay, just because you're old doesn't mean you know everything. And I think the story of Moses is a great example, great caution to us. The next thing is impulsivity or frustration. You know, as I said earlier, we all have limits to our self-control and forbearance. You know, Peter, when he asked, how many times if my brother sins against me, do I have to forgive him? 7 times? Jesus said 77 times, or some places say 70 times 7. Depends on the translation. But it just says to try your best to keep forgiving. And I think, as I say, even God can get angry. And I think that's something to remember. And so the real challenge for us is to be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. Or even if you do sin, to repent and ask for forgiveness at that time. Because all of us do this, all right? Like sometimes things happen in your life, you're sick or unwell, or something's happened, or you get interrupted all the time, and you can't do your thing, and you get grumpy, right? All of us have that. And I can imagine Moses would feel that, right? Like every time they're just complaining all the time, you go a bit crazy. And it's amazing he hung on for so long, but eventually you can't handle it anymore, and you do that. But I think the lesson from that is you repent and come back from that. You don't just double down on stupid, right? Like that's the real challenge, to be humble enough to ask for forgiveness. So what was the consequence? What happened to Moses? So in Deuteronomy 32, I mean, God didn't back down. He said, this is your punishment. You're a leader. You have to bear a higher burden. Go up to this mountain, which is in the land of Moab, opposite Jericho, and view the land of Canaan, which I'm giving to the people of Israel for possession, and die on that mountain, which you go up. Be gathered to your people as Aaron, your brother, died in Mount Hor and was gathered to his people. Because you broke faith with me in the midst of the people of Israel at the waters of Meribah Kadesh, which is translated bitter pool, in the wilderness of Zin, and because you did not treat me as holy in the midst of the people of Israel. For you shall see the land before you, but you shall not go there into the land that I'm giving to the people of Israel. So that was his punishment. He couldn't finish his mission. Okay, his only mission was to bring his people to the land of Israel, the promised land, but God said, you can't do that. And he died with everyone else. So only Caleb and Joshua could go in, which is a tough pill to swallow, right? But I mean, there is a kind of ultimate good ending, which I'll go through at the end. Now, the next character is Judas Iscariot. Okay. Now, Judas was one of the 12 apostles. In Mark 3, 18, 19, Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him, was listed in the 12. He was selected by Jesus to follow him. We don't know the actual background of his selection, but we know he was one of the 12. Now, he was a treasurer. Okay, so it's like Ray, but Ray is better, I think. So yeah, so Judas was the treasurer, and in John 12:6, this was just after the prostitute came to wash Jesus' feet with her hair. Okay, and was pouring precious perfume on his feet. And Judas was complaining, why didn't she give this money to the poor? Okay, so that's an interesting verse because that's written in all four Gospels. Okay, it's one of those few, all four, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So it's a very important story. And it obviously struck the apostles. And it's written there for our learning, okay? So Judas said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief, and having charge on the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Okay, so Judas was like a petty thief. He loved to help himself to the money bag. And it's amazing because Judas followed Jesus for 3 years. You know, he saw the miracles, right? You're there. You saw the lifestyle, you heard the message. He was part of the closest group with Jesus. He was winning, right? He was winning. But he chose to lose. Like, what are you doing? Like, why would you do that? You know, it's like sometimes you can't understand why. He chose to betray Jesus. He told them, give me 30 pieces of silver and I'll betray him. And I mean, and then that's what he did in 26:47-50. While he was speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, with a crowd of swords and clubs, chief priests and elders. And the betrayer gave him a sign saying, the one I kiss is the man, seize him. So he came up to Jesus, said, greetings, Rabbi, and kissed him. And Jesus said to him, friends, do what you came to do. And they seized him. Then we come to that passage we read when Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, because after this, they took Jesus and condemned him to be crucified. He changed his mind and brought back the 30 pieces of silver and said, I've sinned by betraying innocent blood. And he threw it down, left, and then hanged himself. Why did he betray Jesus? Again, I put it to you, greed is one thing. And the other thing is this complacency about consequences is a common theme, actually. Normally, you do something wrong because you don't care about the consequences, right? You say, I can't be bothered, it's fine. Like when you go speeding on the road, you check no camera, it's fine. Even caught, just pay a fine, that's fine. You're complacent about the consequences. That's why generally people sin, right? It's not a big deal. They think, that's fine. You know, the important lesson with Judas is he was a thief beforehand. And the parable of talents, all the parables in the Bible tell us, if you're faithful in little, you'll be faithful in much. And that is the lesson why, that's the reason why the church is such a good place for training. Like you get people to speak here, like, I mean, you may or may not be any good at it, but if you're faithful in little, you'll be faithful in much. And it's an opportunity to train yourself up to be better. Same as when you deal with the money in the church, when you teach or when you do anything. If you are faithful in your responsibilities in little, you will be faithful in much. If you can't even do small things, you can't do big things. Okay, that is the core message. I mean, that's why in the army, they want everyone to keep their clothes clean or neat or have discipline or whatever, because you need to be disciplined in small things to be disciplined in big things. And Judas was stealing in the small things. So he couldn't be relied to stand firm on the big things. Because the big things are even harder. It only gets harder. That's why I always tell people, if you want to do stuff, just do it when you can, because life doesn't actually get any easier as such. You get different challenges and things only get harder. They get more complicated. So when you're young and you got less responsibilities, train yourself up to bear those responsibilities while it's easy, because it only gets harder. Now, just a quick reminder on consequences. We don't really often understand consequences. The classic story is rich man and Lazarus. The rich man thought it was no big deal, right? Like, that's fine. Until he was in hell, then he realized how bad this place is. Send someone to warn my brothers. Then Jesus said, if they don't hear Moses and the prophets, they won't be convinced. Someone rise from the dead, which refers actually to Jesus. And that's the nature of it. Okay, we should not get complacent about consequences of sin. So for poor Judas, he realized what he did and hung himself. He snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. He did not finish his battle. Actually, if he repented, and it's interesting, this is just after Peter. Peter had just denied Christ, but Peter didn't go off and kill himself. He failed, but he came back. I mean, he failed subsequently again, but that's all right. He came back anyway, and he wanted to be better. Judas actually had that opportunity as well, but he chose to end it and not take that opportunity. So just to finish, we can't tell where we will end up in this life, but I can guarantee you all of us are dying one day. Okay, that's what I can guarantee each and everyone here. We can only tell where we will end up at the end of this life. Okay, we will all die and we will all have to answer to God in the end. So we won't know where we go. Will we be rich or poor, die or whatever, or our circumstance? Moses fell short, but despite that, he still was with God. I mean, he obviously was with God because at the transfiguration, it was Moses and Elijah, right? So clearly he was one, he still was accepted by God. So God's grace is still on us all. And Judas refused God's grace and ended up, in a worse situation. We always have a choice to make. Whether we're winning now, losing, in between, neither winning or losing, we can always choose how we want to finish the race. Do we want to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory? Because all of us are winning now. Or do we want to truly enjoy the victory that only God can provide? Thank you.